All right, so we are picking up where we left off with Unit 7, the Progressive Era. This entire time, we've been talking about making progress in order to fix the problems of the Gilded Age. We want to make sure that we remember that the problems of the Gilded Age were created from that rapid, super fast industrialization, that urbanization, the mass movement of people from the rural areas to the cities, and the huge amounts of immigrants coming into the United States. All of this happening at the same time created terrible working conditions, terrible living conditions, and unsafe city life, as well as not so great conditions out in the West and in the South either, as far as agriculture. And all of this comes from the problem of the government was hands off, the government was not getting involved. So, the last little bit of this unit that we look at, we're going to first look at the accomplishments, what was done to fix the problems of the Gilded Age, and then we're going to look at the presidents who accomplished these actions. So, to start, one of our major problems that we discovered from the agrarian movement and the Populist Party was that the people weren't involved enough. So, the progressives are going to push for political reform. And these are going to be ideas that the Populist Party had kind of been rooting for. And their goal was to ensure that elected officials were doing what the citizens wanted. Remember, we had incredibly corrupt government officials at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level that were responding more to big business needs than to the needs of the people. So, to ensure that elected officials were actually listening to the people, we are going to pass three major pieces of political reform that you need to put in your brain. Star these in that note packet. Initiative. This is going to give the people the power to propose new laws directly to the ballot. And the way that they do this is by collecting signatures on a petition. Now, look at that word, initiative. Maybe you've heard people say to you before, take initiative, do something, do it for yourself. This is exactly what we're giving to the people. We're giving them that opportunity to advocate for something that they want to see, a law they want to see, taking initiative. Referendum. The referendum here allows citizens to approve or reject laws that are passed by the legislature. So if there is a law that the citizens want to put their 2 cents in or act as a referee, the root of that word there, they can review those, they can again come together and either approve or reject these laws. And then we have recall. This gives citizens the power to remove public officials from office before their term was up. Think about recalling food or recalling a product, recalling a car. You pull that right off the shelves and you bring it back in before maybe time was up on it because there is something wrong. That's exactly what we're doing to elected officials in order to make them more attentive to what the people need. Another progressive accomplishment that's going to happen at the state level is kind of letting the states be this laboratory for democracy. And this is going to be starting in Wisconsin with a guy named Robert M. La Follette. And he is going to establish what's called a direct primary, where the citizens actually vote for the people running in the next election. So there was no go-between for electing senators. Now, this was not something that had been adjusted in the Constitution yet. The Constitution said that senators were chosen by representatives at the state level. But in Wisconsin, the federal government is going to allow for this to kind of be this experiment and see how it goes with the citizens directly electing their officials. And this is kind of where we find some wiggle room in the 10th Amendment. And it proves to be a little successful. If we look at the political cartoon, you can see Robert La Follette is the guy that kind of looks like the mad scientist there, giving his presentation of the before and after the reforms at the state level that the federal government allowed to happen. Now, this can happen because anything that is not listed in the Constitution as a federal government power belongs to the states, as stated by the 10th Amendment. We see this best example today with legalization. It is not federally accepted to allow states to legalize marijuana, but we're seeing that the federal government is allowing for this experiment to happen to kind of see how it goes. And the same thing happened during the progressive era with the direct election of senators. More at the state level, Teddy Roosevelt, the governor of New York, while he was governor of New York, is going to work to get rid of the spoils system by developing a fair system of hiring workers. He's also going to improve labor laws at the state level and work to advance the park forestry program at the state level within New York. So, again, not federal programs that are taking place, but seeing the states kind of leading in experimenting with how we can make changes that the progressives are calling for. Progressives also work to reform society, and a big piece that goes with this is going to be religion. Religion has a huge hand in the reforms that we will see in the 19th century. Christian principles are going to be applied on improving society, and this becomes known as the social gospel. Gospel reminding us of religion, social, society, and this is where we see a push to end things like child labor. There's going to be a huge focus on the family in the social gospel. So, getting children out of the workplace and at home to kind of get an education in order to succeed later on. Creating a shorter work week will be another thing that's pushed for by the social gospel. Again, that emphasis on the family, getting people back in the home, spending time together. And the social gospel will also push to have the federal government limit the power of corporations and trusts, those monopolies, because the monopolies were what were destroying the families by making children, mothers, fathers work all hours every day and not earn enough to take time off to spend together. So the social gospel will be a huge piece of these reforms that we see in society. Ultimately, progressives want to improve the life of the urban poor, those that are in the cities that are living in the tenement houses. And what they do is they push for settlement houses. Remember when we talked about Jane Addams and the settlement houses, these places where people in the city can go to, if they're immigrants, learn English, if they're single mothers, to have a daycare, and this helps improve the lives of the urban poor. And these are opening up around the country to try to solve some of these problems that we were facing in the cities as well. Now, the progressives are going to go after child labor, and it's going to be kind of an uphill battle here. In the mid 19th century, reformers start to convince the public that primary school education was a necessity for the advancement of the nation as a whole. We needed education to provide better voters to improve the democracy. Also, remember back to the reform movements that we read about. We wanted education to be the equalizer in society among the classes, give everybody the opportunity to an education, not just the wealthy people, get kids not working so that they can go to school, so that the generations coming up can lead a better nation. At the state level, we're going to see minimal requirements for school attendance start to be adopted. Uh, but some things are going to throw a wrench into this idea of ending child labor. One of those is we have immigrants coming from rural backgrounds that believe children had an obligation to work. They're going to come from places where child labor was the norm. So here, they're also going to put their children to work. Um, it, Another piece that we see is people can't survive without their children working. So it's cool that the states want to adopt these education requirements, but until the wages are increased, we aren't going to see that be successful. The Keatings Owen Act is going to be passed in 1916, attempting to ban child labor, but it's going to be proved to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, saying that it overstepped the bounds of the federal government to regulate interstate commerce. Remember that tricky trade between the states. They're saying if we don't have child laborers, then we're not trading as much between the states, and that's a federal government regulation, not a state, and we can't do that. So the Keatings-Owens Act will be ruled unconstitutional. Then, in the meantime, we're going to have the Great Depression happen. The Great Depression increases the demand for child labor because we needed everybody in the family to be working because no one was making enough money to make ends meet. So the child labor fight to get rid of it is going to kind of die down until 1938 when we have the Fair Labor Standards Act be passed, which is going to officially end child labor. This is going to be the first time that there's a national minimum wage, a maximum hour standard for workers. It's also going to place the limits that you see today on child labor, where you can only work in certain industries, you can only work for a certain amount of time. And it affects like what age you have to be. I think under 16 years of age, you can't work a certain number of hours. You also can't work in a certain industry. The reason it's passed in 1938 is because we see the need for child labor die down as the Depression died down. Now, the next time we come back together, we're going to talk about the constitutional amendments and more laws that were passed at the federal level to accomplish what the progressives set out to take care of. Don't forget about your homework tonight, and any questions, let me know.